Perfect.
Yay. So, welcome to the show. This is Sydney. Welcome to this episode of the Movement Mentality Podcast. So, tell us where you live, where you're from. We'll do that overview of what kind of work you do and things that light you up.
Yeah. So my name's Sydney Zwicker. I'm right now based out of Denver, Colorado. Um, I describe my approach as a human as like I'm a like New York Jew, even though like I didn't grow up in New York as much, but I have New York parents, like East Coast. I love the science and I love the woo of mixing them together. But often I say I'm European because my mom's a European immigrant and have a lot of that European energy with it. And that feels like homeland to me more so than the States. But yeah,
And
and the work
where
that
in Europe do you feel that way?
I lived for almost like on and off for a decade in France, in like
Okay.
northwestern Brittany and then in the south coast, outside of Nice. So that's like
Oh,
really where home and where the
mhm.
land speaks to me. Got to have a
Oh.
lot of moss to feel that
Oh.
aliveness.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
I love that.
And then my work, I'm a women's health, pelvic health, especially. I'm a women's pelvic health specialist. I mean, there's so many different names. We've already gone over a couple before we started this, right? Of the work that I do, but I do hands-on, hands-in women's pelvic care, what I call sovereign touch body work and pelvic care work. Really working with a woman's whole system, the idea that we can't separate the story from our tissues. And so many women come to me for a plethora of reasons, whether it's a physical pain point. So, whether it's endometriosis, pain with penetration, something usually along the pelvic health spectrum that is a physical pain point, and someone's told them, go see a specialist. And they'll come to see me to do work in that way. The second thread is often the emotional somatic. So it's trauma integration body work is a big piece of what I weave into the medicine that I offer. And someone might come with from a history of sexual trauma and they've done a lot of therapy, but they still feel it in their body. It can be cultural trauma, like growing up really religiously conservative, as well as just the trauma of being human. I think to be a woman in this world often means to hold a little trauma in our story, living in such a sex negative culture. And the third one is spiritual. Women come to me because they want to embody more of their feminine essence, their story around sexuality, sexual liberation. And honestly, it's a mix of all these threads, right? The physical, the emotional, and the spiritual. You can't separate one without the other. But normally we have a pain point that is specific to one of those three categories. That's the thing that we no longer want to live with. And the way that I offer women work is we do ceremonial pelvic care. So it is a mix of manual therapies as well as somatic sex therapy all together. I like to think of it as if traditional somatic sex therapy is using, or traditional somatic therapy is using the mind to understand the body. In kind of this version of body up, we're using body and touch and the nervous system and our physiology of the nervous system to integrate what's happening in the mind, usually around topics of sexuality, embodiment, wholeness, power, really big themes that come to the root and really get to weave in root medicine in a different and really unique way, is the short
That is
version.
very different and unique. I mean, this is so fascinating. Now I know why Erica connected us.
Yeah.
Um, my girlfriend Erica connected Sydney and I. Okay, so wow. So at one point in your life, you were not doing this.
Yeah.
So what happened?
It's funny because, like, when I look back and we were talking about looking back of how did you get here, I was like, it kind of makes sense, but you couldn't see it until you look back on it. Um, I mean, I think I was always a weirdo kid in some ways, like fascinated with the body and like, loved to like dissect the frogs in biology class. I ended up going and getting an art degree, not even an art and like mythology and psychology degree. I went to NYU where you got to make up your own major and then like half dropped out of NYU and enrolled in a university in France. And, all of these things are like, I love learning. I love weaving together like multiple disciplines that often aren't connected in that way. And so a lot of what I studied in my undergrad was the body and psychology and mythology and sculpture. And so my parents always laugh that I spent, the first part of my early adulthood exploring a career in sculpting the figure. And then I realized like understanding like how do we make art is like the psychology of humans, right? How do we connect all those pieces? And then in my like early 20s in my existential crisis of like, what am I doing? Does it have purpose? Um, really like switched the way I thought about it in my own healing journey. I'm a survivor of sexual abuse that happened in my late teens and was very lucky to be in the right circumstances where I started to get help pretty soon after it had occurred. And like through different therapeutic models, especially somatic therapies and like big, really feel your feelings and like move your body modalities, really got to be obsessed with how quickly I could get out of my very smart mind and into my body where I was actually feeling things. And for a long time thought I was going to become just a somatic therapist, but in the process of really feeling that the body had so much more to say than the mind, and I wanted to figure out a way to shut up in the mind. And that brought me to dance movement therapies. But really, it was holistic pelvic care is the modality that a woman named Tammy Kent created. It's one of the most popular pelvic floor PTs or pelvic floor manual therapy modalities. She wrote a really great book called The Wild Feminine. And I had read this book and done the exercises and then found a practitioner. And it was really in that moment that I was like, this is the thing. I had done a decade of therapy to really move through my trauma. And like, it didn't bother me in my everyday life, but I still could like feel it in my body. This like, you could get to a place where you could still feel the ick. And I remember after my first session, just like it disappearing. And I had talked to my therapist afterwards, being like, I don't know if I just did this thing and broke myself. And like, cause like there's a stillness in my body, there's a quiet I've never heard before. And so maybe I'm dissociated and done. And I remember laughing. It was the first time, and I've been in therapy on and off since my childhood. I had parents who got divorced young, all the things. Like the first time I've ever said, like, I think I had chronic anxiety. And she like laughed at me because I had always just called it, and like in therapy, we called it like the buzz, like the New York City hustle. Like that's my, my hustle vibes, which has just been anxiety. And I remember the first time receiving internal pelvic work, the stillness I felt in my body was so I can't even think of like, it was just so unnerving. I was like, what the fuck just happened? How have I been alive? Like seeing snow or the ocean for the first time. And already I was on a path there. I was already teaching more coaching around sexuality and I'd already been working in the field in that way. But it really just changed everything. And I was like, how do I do this? I don't know how. And there wasn't really a pathway to the way that I work, except for my mentor, who came from the somatic psychotherapy realm and then kind of added on body work. And I was coming kind of from the opposite of I'd done all this personal somatic psychotherapy and like had started studying on my own, thinking I was going to go do that professionally, and instead came back from the body and really built this practice and this modality of doing trauma integration body work and using a lot of somatic psychotherapy techniques to help people process through, to tell their story, and to let the cells of our body tell their story and reorient to safety. And I kind of just wove together the things that I could find. I've been very, very lucky and blessed that it resonated with people. And very, like, basically, very early in my career was, very successful in it and have been doing it now coming into my 7th year.
Wow, that's incredible. Congratulations. I
Thank you.
love that. That's so amazing. How inspiring. So, okay, so are you teaching this to other professionals? Like, have you
Some of
created
it,
your own
yes.
method?
Yeah, like so I'm really excited this year. I feel like I'm just coming out of this big liminal space of I cut my client load in half to really make space to teach. I've mostly been teaching in a one-to-one mentorship, mentoring other practitioners, either in the pelvic health world, women's coaches, like sexuality coaching world, as well as other body workers. So I ended up going to massage school as part of my journey to get a license to touch. And I've because I learned pelvic work before I learned massage, I've always approached this body with like the trauma integration body work method of like really seeing our tissues in this different way. And so since like year 2 of having a practice, I've had other body workers ask to come and like learn how I do certain techniques. Like I have a whole TMJ and intraoral protocol that I do and I teach because before I learned intraoral work, I learned how to do intervaginal work. And so no one really has their mouth touched like we touch pussies. And so that's been really transformative for so many women. And
Mm.
all over the Denver area, people come to me specifically for that work. And as I transitioned out of offering it, other facilitators wanted to take over that. And so I've been teaching that work as well as, but always mostly in like a small group or one-to-one mentorship, mostly because I really loved that small scale and I didn't have capacity to teach on a larger scale. But kind of what I'm moving into is whether it looks like starting a school or doing offering trainings of really bringing in how do we not just offer trauma informed body work, which just seems like a silly branding like the blue badge on Instagram, but really understand how does trauma move through the body and how do we hold space in this way of allowing the body to integrate, right? If Gabor Mate, his famous quote of trauma is not what happened to you, but what happens inside of you. And touch is such a powerful way of changing what is happening inside of you. We get to use the nervous system. We get to use our sensory nerves to flood our body with messages of safety and reorient our cells and our stories to something different, and really getting to think of the body that way, more so than just, okay, what is our fascia doing? How do we bring in structural integrity? And really take this whole pathway of what is nervous system centered touch and trauma integration body work really look like, and creating integral facilitators, right? I think for me, the biggest part that I saw in so much of the coaching world, I'm sure you see this too, is people are really touched by work and then they want to offer it. And I think that's great. I think most of what makes us a good practitioner is our lived experience, but having the time and the space to like really go deep within themselves so that they can also go deep and hold others versus trying to just learn a technique mentally. You have to feel it, you have to experience it. And so offering these deeply experiential workshops and trainings for facilitators to come and taste the medicine that many of us use in pieces of in our own practices and then take it into your whatever you offer.
Awesome. That's so cool. So if someone's listening right now and they have never heard the words that you're saying, I
Yeah,
could see them being very confused, right? Like trauma is stored in the cells and lives in a tissue, right? So it could sound vague from a sense of like I don't know what she's saying. If I was a client or a patient, right?
totally.
So let's kind of break this down for the listeners for a bit. So I have a really great example for you that I think you'll love
Yeah,
and would be really cool for the audience to hear. So, no joke, this happened to me yesterday where I'm hiring one of my girlfriends to help me with strength training. And I just wanted a little pizzazz in my movement that wasn't from my husband because my husband's been designing my strength programs for like 10 years. And I was like, I want a girlfriend to do it. So, long story short, we're on a Zoom call, right? Like a FaceTime actually. And she starts talking about exhalation focused exercise and the transverse abdominis and all these things. And I start crying
mhm,
just hearing and watching her describe contracting my abdomen.
yeah,
Because, and I've had two C-sections. They were both unwanted, unplanned for. I've had a lot of sessions dealing with this and my relationship to it. And I've had birth story healing sessions. And I'm really far. I'm far into the trying to change my relationship with this. And then it came up yesterday, right? I'm like, wow, I'm crying because I know I'm going to have to exhale and contract my abdomen, right? When right now water can barely touch my C-sections without me like having a heebie-jeebies, like, ugh. Plus all the emotional story that I have about a movement professional not being able to have a vaginal birth and it going against all of my beliefs. And I had 4 midwives and a water tub and essential oils and flowers and I was like the whole world, I'm sure you can imagine. So
yeah,
someone like me that's like the natural is the way, and then I end up having all the drugs, surgery, all the things, right? So it might be like a lifelong healing process for me. Maybe it is something I can help clear, not maybe sooner than a lifetime. That would be nice. Um,
It
so
is.
with yeah, so with your approach and the way that you see it, and obviously it's stored in my tissues and cells, right? Plus all the emotional stuff that's correlated to that. How would you kind of walk me through my first steps or explain why I started crying in this conversation or have me grasp, like, what do you mean by this? And how do you see this scenario?
Yeah, if we were on a discovery call right now and you were sharing like this is what's happening, I want it to be different. That would be my first question, right? I think I truly believe everything can heal and that your body wants to be healing. Your body wants to be in wholeness and balance. And sometimes it doesn't understand that it's not there because parts of us can get stuck in the past. Is the kind of the first connection, right? If your body has no fucking clue that like cutting with a knife open and taking a baby out of you and then sewing up those 7 layers is actually possible. There's no way for your animal brain, let's call it that, to understand what happened to you. It just hears bright red, danger, something bad. We probably were going to die, but we didn't. And so already, like, how do we start to bring in the connection between what happened to you in your cognitive brain and the unconscious brain that doesn't understand that? And I think the biggest part for what I think of when I'm seeing if a client is right to work with me is understanding and do they believe that things can change? Because when we don't believe things can change, it's very hard to make a change in the body.
So do
Um,
you ask that in a consult straight
I
away?
I do sometimes exact directly like that. Sometimes a little bit more like there might need to be more therapy around this. Like I have broken up with clients before when I'm like, this work is, there are big shifting and we've come to a point until you want to actually feel better. Um, it's really hard to go deeper. Like I can keep doing, we can keep doing the things and we'll get to like, similar like a massage. Like we go to the massage, I feel good. And then 2 hours later, I feel bad again. It's that a lot of us are really connected to our pain. It's a really piece about what keeps us safe, right? I know this very well. The unknown of something different can feel really extreme. And so, like, if I hear someone say, like, I'm probably going to have this story until I die, I ask them, do you want to have this story until you die? Because it's totally possible for you different. Like, you will never be the same Missy you were pre C sections. But the story of the shame of that I'm a movement facilitator and a master in my craft, and I didn't get to have a birth like I coach other people to have births through, is a story. Because we also live in a system that's pretty fucking broken, where there's so many factors at play. And so the somatic psychotherapy piece of this is like really understanding: are you willing to believe that something can change? And if the answer is yes, then we're a good fit. And I can explain it through all the science and all the things, but there's that heart piece that someone has to want to believe that
Mm.
something can be different. Because I don't work with women who want me to come fix them. There are PTs for that. There is a lot of methodology that's for that. If I'm only here to help facilitate you and teach you the languages of things you don't already know, but that you're doing all the work. And to work with a facilitator is about being held and doing trauma body work or trauma work as a whole. The difference between me teaching you how to touch your own body and me touching your body for you and us in the room is that when we're going to those places like your C-section scar, that touching with water feels traumatic, right? So you have to be, if you're doing the C-section scar work yourself, I can imagine that you have to feel the ick in your body while also thinking about, am I doing the stroke in the right way, and am I holding the stretch? Like, what am I feeling emotionally and physically? It's a lot to hold for yourself. You're playing the puppet master. Having a facilitator is I get to hold that state of hypervigilance, holding all the pieces for you, and you get to just be with what is. You get to have that, like, there's less things for me to do. I only have this one task of being in my body or not, and then connecting in. And in that, I think it really facilitates healing on a deeper level, and is the reason why people work with a facilitator. For some, like if you were, the idea of me touching your scar was like that sent you into a panic attack and felt way too much and everything shut down, maybe what I would offer is like coaching or virtual work where you work on your scar, because if the too much is coming from me being there versus you being there. I'm like splitting this up into many different pieces. I
No,
hope
I
that
love
so
this
far
so much.
lands.
I'm like already thinking because I have people work on my scars all the time because of obviously what I know. And I'm like, no problem. Like I
Yeah.
just lay there. I'm like, cool. But it's that internal, I don't know what it is. Internal dial. It's not a dialogue. It's that I don't know what it is when you have to go super introspective and you're with it and
Yeah.
uh, but when other people do it, to me it's like very logistical. They're makeup brush, rough toothbrush, vibration, soft towel, hands pulling all the things. I love it. I and it always works. And I'm like, so maybe before my next pregnancy, I believe I can move forward. I really believe I can, but we're not there yet. So I'm kind of in a space of like, what is there left to do and where do we go? Because I talk to so many different professionals about it.
Yeah, I'll use an example of like peeing your pants, another thing that happens postpartum for many women, right?
Mhm.
Bladder incontinence, I think is a really great, easy example to see how things turn from a physiological, because all of what you talked about, the scar tissue work, everything is also super important. We can't forget about that. But I think bladder incontinence is a very simple one that many women can relate to. Is um, the first time you have bladder incontinence and you pee your pants, it could be because you just had a baby and your bladder shifted around and things are out of alignment. And it is a functional problem. And you can go see a traditional pelvic floor PT, they can realign your bladder. But that first time that you peed your pants, maybe in the grocery store, there's a huge flush of shame and fear and everything else that comes on board that, oh my gosh, I peed my pants. And the trauma of that situation, because I'd say for most women, peeing your pants in public is traumatic, is now every time you have the urge to pee, you might be reminded of like, or go to the grocery store, what if I pee my pants right now? What if this happens? And so you very quickly have gone from a functional bladder incontinence to a psychosomatic, and it could be both. And I've seen this happen. Traditional pelvic floor PT would probably do intervaginal work to like lift the bladder, put it into its right physiological alignment, and say, you're good to go. Go do life. But if your body, if your brain, like proprioception, still has the story of like, I'm afraid or something's wrong, it's going to pull that bladder out of alignment, whether it's because you're going to be contracting your core differently or walking differently. It's going to compensate to the story of its reality, which is that day in the grocery store. And so that's where the message is not true, or where the message is like, it's a game of telephone. That's a miscommunication because our body's not out to get us. But it's holding this truth, this story that something bad's going to happen. Let's squeeze the bladder. And all of a sudden you feel the incontinence. And I could go and check, and your bladder might actually be out of alignment again. The difference is in the way that I work, if we're doing this bladder alignment, and say we do the exact same manual therapy techniques, we do slightly internal vaginal work to lift the bladder, notice how all the ligaments, everything functionally is working. And at this time, we're gonna reprocess that. I'm gonna maybe talk about like, what were you feeling in your body if you were to go next to, maybe a year ago version of you? Like, were you feeling overwhelmed? You're like new mom, you had to go to the grocery store. Maybe there's still grief around your C-sections and having this new life you had to keep going. Like, what are the stories? What was happening in your life there that was causing stress? Or tell me about what happened after. Whatever story comes up for you. Sometimes it's just my cue is as simple as, what are you thinking about in this moment? Like, it's what's coming up for you as we hold the bladder here. And maybe there's a little sensation. And that story, and in speaking that story, and I've had it happen multiple times with lots of different parts of tissue, but the bladder in particular, and I'm just holding the bladder. Like, just like I have that one finger, I'm just gently putting contact onto those tissues. A woman tells her story. And I've done no manual technique to move the bladder, and the bladder goes, and it moves itself. And all of a sudden, similar to just like any point in your life where you just had to say something and all of a sudden all the stress and relief just goes away. It's like an exhale. And now that tissue through my touch, because we're bringing touch to it, right? We're bringing stimulation in the sense that touch and the story, all of a sudden your brain is able to take in. There's a new neural pathway that happened to me that is not happening to me. And now the bladder is holding, and that tensegrity in the fascia, that connective tissue, literally changes. The same way that just manually, when you stretch fascia, you ask proprioception, you ask the brain to connect to the body and say, hey, what's up, dude? And we're doing that through sometimes the story is in the emotional somatic or in what we think is happening or happened versus what's actually there. And so we've just had the brain check in with the bladder. It's like, oh, bladder, great, nothing's wrong. I'm going to stop sending messages of danger. And we've just basically healed the story and the bladder together. And that's something I can't do for you, right? I can just be here to initiate you into doing for yourself. If you were to hold the story that I will always pee my pants in the grocery store, your body might always have a slight extra tension in your pelvis every time you walk into a grocery store. I like to think when that metaphor of like the grocery store, that story, like everyone knows that like certain grocery stores have a smell, Walmart smell a certain way. Like there's something that happens in your body when you're in a specific sensation, like you're taking it in, like Walmart smell away. And I always will be like, why the fuck am I here? Let me get out of here. I just know I need this one thing that's only at a Walmart. And then I'd like get the fuck out and I feel like I've been haunted by demons or whatever the thing is. But that piece of my body knows and can feel it because of the senses of my nose smelling the Walmart smell, the lighting in the room, all those things. Right, exactly that exact like ick face. And so getting to understand that we're constantly being bombarded by information, and when we can orient for the brain and the body to be on the same page, we often find health and vitality. And in our world, because we're so head based and not body based, those messages are often not in alignment or not in the same space. And so, how do we get them to just be talking to each other? And I really think of the psychosomatic, so body mind connection work with touch is we get to have them be in the same room. And I often think of it as like a control alt delete of like, hey, like let's reorient to see if what we thought was true is still true. Um, and so getting to really work in that unwinding. A lot of the work I do is through fascia, so our connective tissue, that the mycelium network of our body, and how it speaks to where are you in space and time right now? How do you feel yourself? Because even if you're not, or you don't have the practice of scanning your body and feeling yourself and like being with yourself, that like really introspective or interoception that you were talking about with your C-section scar, your body's still doing it. Your unconscious mind is still doing it, even if you're not doing it consciously. But when we start to bring in and cultivate the conscious practice of interoception, so how am I feeling in my internal world, and how does that reflect in the space between where I am and where I'm not, can be so powerful in changing the way our body holds posture. Like different emotions have posture. If you walk into a room with people you love, you can tell who's sad, who's happy, who's maybe like completely numbed out. There's so many ways that we actually hold that, and they're not saying anything. You haven't asked anyone how their day is, but you can tell by their posture. And our body holds that, and our posture is a story. And so we do structural work, we do structural manipulation work to change the story of ourself, which then changes our posture and changes the way we weave in the world. Right? We say, open your heart. Great. But like, can we actually physically stand up taller and have that happen? And for many of us, we can't when we hold the story that it's dangerous to be chest open, titties up, like, come at me. And so, how do we really create a safety within the body and then in and within our tissues at the same time?
So awesome.
Yeah.
I'm just like, so clearly you have a deep conviction for this work, right? Like you are like you're the person to go to for this type of thing. Absolutely. I'm like, how soon can I get to Denver? Um so it's it's so needed.
Yeah.
It's crucial actually. Like this, it's like beyond needed, right? It's crucial that women have access to this type of education. So how have you dealt with creating a business that is unconventional, doesn't have this traditional trajectory? It's not this clear cut, like you take these courses and you get this, and this is what you do. How do you deal with the whole world of it? Like, does anyone ever say, this is quackery or anything like on your Instagram or anything like that? Like, how do you deal with the whole world of kind of creating your own methodology based on your different experiences? Like you said, you love weaving together different disciplinary, approaches.
Yeah, it's definitely fascinating for sure. I do think my conviction helps bring the right people towards me. Like, I really speak from this place of like, I'm so fucking passionate about this. And I also know it's not the only way, it's just the way that I do it, what makes sense to me. And I really believe in that I'm not the right fit for everyone. And I think that brings people more towards me is I have some teachers who are very dogmatic and like their way on Instagram is like, let's shame you if you're doing it wrong. There is a wrong and a right way. And I don't believe that. There's a wrong and a right way for me. But like, I don't know what's best for you. And really, like, the theme of the way that I speak about the work and when I teach work, I call it non agendaed touch. And my job is to get the fuck out of the way of and really ask your body, what does it need? And I think that's why so often it resonates, and I'm constantly in my work shocked by like the body telling me it wants something really fucking weird. And I'm like, I ask consent with people before I do it. Like, they come in for low back pain and I'm like unwinding their nasal cavity. And a lot of them trust me at this point. But that piece around, I don't know what's best. And I really think the teachers, and I even call it the masters I know, are constant students. And like, for me, it's about getting curious, not about being right. And there's times when my ego totally gets into it. But I think the biggest piece around even just like speaking to this work is empowering others, right? I think the majority of my job is education, and education in saying, like, here's what I know to be true and here's the facts that I know. And if it resonates, take it. And if it doesn't, leave it. My favorite thing to do with clients is like, there will come a point where you want to say, fuck you, Sydney. And like, the invitation is there. I love that. I love it when you say, fuck, that's not my truth. Or, fuck you because you saw the thing that I didn't want to look at. Great. We don't have to deal with it. Like, you get to stay wherever you are for as long as you want to be there. Um, and that, I think, really empowers others uh, and makes less confrontational at times. I've definitely had like, I had a couple of like back in the day when reels first came out, a couple of things around the clitoris that like went viral. And you have the weird people all over the world being like, that bitch is crazy. And like, it's like, yeah, like as a culture, we're like really uncomfortable talking about sexual things. And like, you're going to want to attack on the internet. And I definitely say I've stayed small since like the preconception of my business. I would say like before I even really was facilitating anything full time. I always thought of myself at the witch as at the edge of the woods. Like, I'm not here to like come into the village and shout, a little bit more these days, but it's really like you have to have the courage to do something scary at the edge of the woods to like have access to me. To have access to what I have to offer. Like, no hero ever like became a hero without going on the heroic journey of, this is terrifying, I might die, but it's worth it enough to me. And that's really what I offer is like, my door is open, maybe not in the same way, but is open when you're ready. I don't want to work with you. I don't think you have to work with me. I have a lot of skills and tools and deep medicine, but my medicine is for a specific person. And if it's not you, great, go find your person. I have colleagues who are much more, I would say, in the like, oh my goddess energy, and like they go to Bali half the year and all those things. And like, that's not my person. Often that person, I've had actually a couple of people who are in that field, even somatic psychotherapists who have come to start working with me and paid me thousands of dollars and leave before they've ever finished any of our containers together, because it's really fucking triggering when I invite you into feeling and you've spent your whole life thinking about feeling, but then actually feeling in your body. And that's what I'd say, like with your C-section scar, right? Is like someone else doing the work and understanding the why it's important. You can be present for the why, but to like actually feel yourself, to be in that interoception is fucking terrifying, is really hard. I like devote my life to this and want to live and value being in my body. And there are days where I don't, or like, oh, I have to like be partially dissociated to survive this moment. This is a really uncomfortable situation I'm in, and how do I be present with it? But present might not be feeling my whole entire body. It might be, how do I stay with my body, but like know that I'm going to have to do repair work within that when I'm in safety, right? And so for so many people, it's about like the invitation for the fuck you, Sydney is there, because there might be times where I say something that resonates as like, fuck, ouch, I don't like that truth. Fuck you, Sydney. Like the defensiveness that comes when someone shows us that we're out of congruency with ourselves. And I think for me, that's a really big value in my business. And I share that with clients is like congruency is so important. Integrity, right, is about when you are out of congruency, making the commitment to come home. And it's not about being like in the straight line, always doing everything right, but there's like a little bit of a flow, like a little left, a little bit right of like the home mark. And when you're too far out of that, there's a way of which you're not living in your value system. And it makes it so that like, are you showing up well for the world? People can feel that. And just because what my value system is doesn't mean it has to be yours. I have teachers who we have very different value systems, but some of our values are similar and we're able to walk near each other. But like, would we want to hang out all the time? No. There are clients of mine who like, we could be best friends. And there are clients of mine who's like, this is great work. I'm so glad we did it together. And then they move on and I move on. And it was a moment in time where it was really good to be in relationship. And so it's a long-winded answer to why people come and how. And I think the biggest thing is like, I'm not here to fix anyone. I'm not here to tell anyone how they do their journey. Like you have sovereignty. My whole business title, like Sovereign Touch, is all about empowering you in your own sovereignty for you to choose what is a yes and what is a no. And I think that makes the work that I offer really empowering and like makes people attracted to working with me. Probably in the same as it like makes people say, fuck you, you're not going to fix me. I'm paying you money. Like I just don't see them because they walk away. And there are enough people who want to be empowered that, because we live in a very disempowering, disembodying culture that resonate with my system and way of approaching.
Yeah. I mean, this conversation is so important for especially the people doing the solopreneur thing. Even I, still to this day, I would consider myself successful. Okay. I have air quotes.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean I don't deal with self doubt or question things. But what's so cool when I hear you and visualize this witch at the edge of the woods and someone needing to get to the edge of the woods to work with you, it just opens up so much freedom because I think a lot of my audience deals with they want to weave different disciplines together, but they're so scared of the upset it would cause and what their peers would think and all these things. And I was like that for a very long time. And I just recently have been able to say, listen, like I'm not XYZ. I don't want to be, and that's okay. This is what I have to offer you. And just keep swiping if you don't like what's going on over here, right? Um, but when you try to please who you don't even want to please, there's so much resistance inside, and then you're unhappy, and then you're resentful, and all these. So it's just so much easier to be who you actually are and see who you actually want to see. But I hear you're in such a beautiful headspace with your business and what you stand for, and you can clearly tell that you are someone who's okay with human machinery doing human machinery things. Like if someone said F you, you'd be like, good job. I'm
Yeah.
proud of you, like
I have a client right now who like our goal is to, she's like, at some point I'll say, fuck you. She like flicked me off during a session once and I was like, we're almost there. We're almost there. But
that's so
yeah, I
awesome.
think it's like that big piece, right? Of a lot of women who come to work with me are entrepreneurs, are creatives, are somewhere in the healing arts. And like this feels like if they're working with women or around the like the yeah, like the embodiment of womanhood, right? Whatever their field is, right? Erica's sound healing, but like really does so much around like our humanity piece, but the lived experience of a woman in humanity, come because they want to have tools to connect with themselves so they can offer it somewhere else. And a lot of what we work with is imposter syndrome in our humanity, right? It's not just our career. And, the one thing I say, when you can come into the root, and obviously I'm very biased, but when we come into the root, you really like, the one thing I can guarantee everyone will walk away with if they show up for this work is a connection to their fuck yes and their hell no. Whether or not you listen to your fuck yes and hell no is like your choice. And there are times where I still don't listen to my hell no because I really want it to be different. But that piece of like our body is such a compass for us. And like to feel it, like you can feel my hell no is my literally my anal sphincter clenches. And if I can feel it, or if I see like, oh, my hemorrhoid is flaring, like that is telling me, even if something else, like something is happening in my body and I have those tools and I've practiced it. And that piece I think is really important in what I can offer women, and men. I do occasionally work with men, uh, in their bodies and in the journey of like, there's so many ways to do this. And for me, and like my passion about people having connection with their body, in particular with their pelvis, their root, their genitals, like this, my passion is not that you do it my way. My way is my way because I love it and I teach what I teach because it's resonated in my body and it still feels so fucking true to me. But like if you need to go see a pelvic floor PT because you are, 4 weeks postpartum and you have a rectocele, so like you can't poop, like I'm not the person to see you. One, financially and time wise, my sessions are a minimum of 3 hours, 2.5, 3 hours. Like you don't have time when you're in that early
Mm.
postpartum. I have a great PT I'm going to refer you to that will do the structural things. We don't have to do the emotional somatic piece to still heal. You need capacity to work in the way that I work with clients. And if you're not there yet, maybe the trauma is still like, you had a violation 6 months ago. Have you gone to traditional therapies or like a talk therapist? Do you have someone who's supporting you in like being able to have the capacity to move through it through your body? And so knowing that there's so many different ways to have a relationship. And when clients ask like how, like what's my lane of pelvic health, I think a really good visual of like how I work with the body. I describe like there's like it's a line graph of how do we interact with the pelvis. On one side you have the medical, and on one side you have the sexual. And my space is in between in this non-agented touch, or like the therapeutic, but non-agented therapeutic touch, which is because on the medical side, the agenda is fix you because you're broken as soon as possible, usually. And in that medical, you have gynecologists, you have certain types of PTs, you have people who are doing things to you. That work is important. Manual therapies are important. And like having an agenda is not bad. It's just a way of doing it that only accesses part of the scale of healing. On the sexual side of things, it's also an agenda, like whether it's with a partner or you want to see kind of a sex worker or a sexological body worker who does really pleasure orgasmic following things. Like the goal is usually an orgasm or some sort of ecstatic experience to heal. There's nothing wrong with that. Pleasure and orgasm are deeply healing for the body. If we think of the physiology of an orgasm, it is a spontaneous contraction of the pelvic tissues that will increase blood flow, that will increase lymphatic flow. There's lots of physiology that's really great for orgasms besides the neuro chemistry that changes. And like that agenda of if you don't come, we didn't do it right, is a blockage to a section of the healing path. And so where I offer clients is this other place. When we take agenda out, it often means like we might not be doing it in the way you think you're doing it. Someone comes in with back pain to a massage therapist and you don't touch their back, often they'll get really pissed at you. I tell clients like, you're coming in with pelvic pain, we might not work your pelvis the whole time or at any time. We sometimes don't do genital touch for the first handful of ceremonies and sessions because we're working with organ alignment and we're doing that via the belly. And so really allowing that space of the body to tell us, we get to have intention, but that agenda is one of the keys that keeps us away from finding the truth of what the story is.
So beautiful. This was so awesome and so beneficial. I know my audience and they are going to love this talk for a lot of different reasons, like 10 different reasons. So two things. I'll ask you them separately, okay? Question one is, if you could write yourself a letter
Mm.
at your lowest point, what would the first line of that letter say?
I would probably say, "Hey, you." Um, yeah, my lowest point. Mm, let's go there. I'd really invite her to say, "Fuck you, Sydney." Like, it's gonna be okay. And then like have a space for and like remember like at kids' school when you like had to learn cursive and it would have the word and you have to trace over it? I'd have a space where it could trace over, "Fuck you, Sydney." So I was like, everything's gonna be okay. And then the line for me to fill in the blank, which is a "Fuck you, Sydney."
Oh,
That would
I
be the letter.
love that. I love that. So, what okay, it's interesting cuz that specific sentence has come up a lot for you in this podcast.
Yeah.
Is that like your running thing that you wish you would have said a long time ago, or what is that for you?
I don't think it is. I've never said it so much in a podcast before. Usually the thing I would say is like everything can heal. And that is true too. Like if like the question of like, what do you want anyone to know if they take away nothing else from this is like everything can heal. There are so many ways to do it. And like you just have to find the right way for you would be like my traditional thing. But I think that what "fuck you, Sydney" really means to me in this moment is it's like the pleasure in like when you're in your lowest point, when you're like exhausted. And I think of this so much of like how chronically exhausted, especially as women we are and mothers we are in this world. Like the idea of having to do something else to heal, spend more money, like the next step, taking that next step into like, I want to feel better. The "fuck you, Sydney" is a permission to just feel fucking tired. The breath before you take the first step into trying the next thing, into bringing hope back in to the hopelessness. Because hopelessness is a part of the healing process. I think the grief, right, of what we lost. Um, the story that some of us really love. I'm a 4 on Enneagram, so I love the story that I'm super fucking special and everyone can heal but me. Or that thing, but like really the permission slip to say like I don't fucking like that I have to do something to just make it feel better. Like throwing the temper tantrum, I think is so important in finding that energy to hope and take the steps. And like so much with clients is that I think they most of us think that healing, like mix up healing and relief. Like healing is fucking work. Healing is chopping the wood, fetching the water, and like doing it over and over again and becoming until it becomes a habit, it becomes a part of you. Like that is healing. Healing is not always fun. Healing is exhausting, but relief is that moment where you're like, ah, look back and like, wow, I'm not the same woman. Wow, I can't believe I did it. I don't know when I did it, but now I'm okay. Like and that I think is we're all searching for relief in this world that we live in. And healing is different. And so "fuck you, Sydney" is permission to not like the process, but still do the fucking process.
Yes. It's I my best friend and I talk about this all the time, how healing is exhausting. And I don't think people understand the true process of how challenging it can be. It doesn't have to be, but it's a lot of work. Like you said, the chopping of the wood. You got to figure out how to chop wood. And then your first time you're not good at it. And then your second time you're still not good, and you're doing the thing to eventually get the result. People ask me that often. Why are you so happy? How are you so happy? And I want to shake them. Like, do you know you don't know what I've had to do to get here and be this way? I don't cross my fingers and hope it lands in my lap. I do a lot of stuff. So, Sydney, thank you so much for your time. You're in Denver, Colorado. You answered the second question, by the way, which is what do you want someone to know and take away from the podcast?
Great.
Um, yeah, so that was awesome. I was like, oh, she already knew what I was going to ask. And so if and when someone has a question for you, what's the best way to find you, contact you, and learn about you?
I'm on Instagram at my business name, which is Zwicker, my last name, Healing Arts. And that's a great way to figure out more about me. I made a lot of content in 2021 and 2022. So like backstock me, they're really funny reels that I made. And I only started making content again this year. I took 2 years off and because I was going through a divorce and didn't want to be on the internet.
Mm.
My website as well, very simple, zwickerhealingarts.com. I think if you type Sydney pelvic woman Denver, it will also show up there because of Google. Um,
Yeah, great.
yeah, uh, yeah, that's the best ways to find out more about me. I do offer like discovery calls for women. I do virtual work because I have lots of clients all over the world who want to do this work but don't have access to someone doing it this way. And I have clients flying to see me to do pelvic ceremony and touch work. And yeah, so
That's so beautiful.
yeah.
Thank you so much for your time. It was very valuable and insightful. I learned a lot. I appreciate you, and I know that my audience will love this talk. So thanks for being on the show.
Of course, Missy. Thank you. This is so
Thank
much
you
fun.
for your time. Yay, you're so welcome. Thank you so much. All right, we'll see you on the interwebs.